Welcome to Mission Oriented, a veteran crowd podcast that showcases veteran talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere. We are here to uncover it. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Welcome to the Mission Oriented podcast. I am your host, Bob Louthan. I'm pleased to have with me today Paul Habenicht. He is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis 2002, fellow Darden graduate school, MBA from Darden. Way to go, Darden, class of 2009, and U.S. Marine Corps veteran. Paul, welcome to the program. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, you are a successful entrepreneur, had a successful exit at VetEvolve. We're going to talk about that in a minute because I really want to drill down on your experience about being a military veteran and an entrepreneur at the same time. I want to probe you for some good stories about that. But let's tell everybody how you ended up attending the Naval Academy.
It was a winding path, I think. Like many people that went there, my interest in the school originated 9th or 10th grade. I was a lacrosse player and started to get some attention there, and went to a handful of what they called unofficial visits back at that time. This was before texting and the NIL and all those good things.
You missed out on all of their money, huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we went to what was called an unofficial visit in 10th grade, which is you're there with your parents or whoever's with you, and there are 30 different people there, and you have a lunch and do a tour, but it's very kind of group based and not individual. And that was my first exposure to the school, up in Annapolis, and actually seeing it. I mean, I knew what it was, but it was my first exposure to the team and to the players. And over the course of the next 2 years, I continued on my recruiting process, and through a variety of different reasons, the Naval Academy kind of rose to my top 2 or 3. Ended up applying and getting my appointment separate from the lacrosse recruiting process. They kind of happened at the same time, and arrived at kind of the very early part of my senior year. Did an official visit there, which is just you without your parents, staying with the team, spend a couple days there, go to class, go to practice. And when I did that process, it's hard to describe, but the fit with the team and the people was just better than I felt at any other place. It was a very competitive program at the time, still is, but was a great school, and I just felt sort of in a strange way that it was a really good fit for me, and kind of decided on my way home, driving back from
lacrosse is really becoming more of a national sport. When you and I were younger, it was mid-Atlantic, northeastern, kind of a conclave, but it is a great game. I mean, when did you fall in love with it?
Yeah, it's an awesome game, and it's kind of that good mix of contact and speed, and it was one of those. I played a bunch of sports, but it was one of the first sports where, as I began to develop as a younger player, felt like I could kind of do what I wanted on the field, and my game was developing very quickly. And kind of halfway through my 10th or 11th grade year, the game really slows down, and you can kind of see everything. And had the benefit of having a really good high school coach. Was extremely active coach, very demanding coach, but knew how to put people in the right position. So I just had a great experience. Played on good teams in high school.
And, what was your position again?
I played midfield in high school, and was fast in the stack for high school. And then in the first day at Navy, I realized I was slow in the stack in college, so switched to attack and played man up and attack in college and Navy. And just a great group of guys, and just learned a ton. And one of the cool things that I realized about the lacrosse program there, pretty early on was, regardless of what challenges people had at Navy with academics and managing the game and the demands of Division I sports, almost across the board, the performance in the Navy and in the Marine Corps for lacrosse players and most team athletes was really, really good. So guys would leave and graduate, and then they'd come back for a game a couple years later, and they were doing really cool stuff and performing really well. And getting to put all those lessons to work. And
Was there a minute when you had to make the choice between Marine Corps and Navy, or did you have a fix on that before you got there?
I had no fix. I was very open-minded. I was not really particularly interested in the Marine Corps when I went there. Didn't know a ton about it, other than seeing the commercials and just general knowledge, and was a little bit open. I mean, I was a little bit unsure about what I wanted to do going into my junior year. And my coach at the time, Richie Mead, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, these two guys are coming into town tonight. Brendan Higgins and Eric Kapitulik, and you should go out and have dinner with them, and they're going to talk to you about the Marine Corps. Like, you should do that." And I was like, "Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe, we'll see. I don't want to cut my hair. I don't want to." Do that. And about 10 minutes into dinner with these guys, I was, just kind of like my type of people. And
You didn't feel like you were going to look that great in the high and tight, huh? Just
I didn't. And then, people reminded me I didn't look that great to begin with. So
there you go.
yeah, it was all pretty
answer.
good. But it was another thing, it just sort of, my coach, he'd been Coach Richie Mead, he coached there for many years, and he'd seen a lot of people transition into the Navy and do well. And he just had a sense that kind of that was for me, and those were my kind of people. And the rest was history after that. I did the Leatherneck program after my junior year, did well there, and then service selected that my senior year. My senior year was 9/11, so that was September of my senior year. So the paradigm really shifted on my way to thermodynamics class there in 2002 or 2001, I guess. And
the world has a funny way of changing our plans in the military.
It sure does. It sure does. But it was a tough time for the country, and in hindsight, it's a very uncertain time. But in the Marine Corps world, that provided a lot of clarity. Everybody knew what they're doing. Everything was very real. Your training ops were going to become real ops. Right. So provided a lot of focus, and despite all the stuff that comes with deployments and combat operations, it was just one of the best experiences I've ever had. I mean, that and being a parent, it's kind of the best things that happened to me.
Won't go into the deployments and that sort of thing too much. You get out of the Marine Corps, pick the absolutely the best business school in the country, little known gym in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, I had
I'm not biased, by the way.
After spending 4 years in military school and taking a bunch of visits down there to see my buddies, I always wanted to come back to Virginia. I wanted to go to Charlottesville. Wanted to live there for a couple of years. And as I started to learn more about the school and interview with people and alums who had gone there, I really got very focused on Darden exclusively. It was the only school I applied to. And at that point, they had a very big and active military recruiting effort. They were trying to pull people direct, from the military, and it another thing just kind of ended up working out. I got in early, and it worked well with my end of service, and I went there and tried to catch that bus as quick as I could.
I got to give a shout. I am biased. I'll give a shout out to UVA and the Darden School there, because they've always had the Darden Military Association, and I think they, realize that bringing folks like yourself into that environment adds a little bit to the mix, that leadership experience that you had that was different than so many others. I mean, because, it's not like it's World War II where almost everybody's in uniform. It's still, 1%. So, and I think Darden targets having something like 10%,
I think it was 10 or 15%, when I was there. And for me, it was fantastic because I'd done, I had deep exposure to the Marine Corps and knew some pilots and that sort of thing. And I had buddies in the Navy, but I had not seen really how they had developed. So to be sitting in class trying to learn accounting with a guy who was a division officer from a sub, or someone from the Army, or a SF guy, it was cool to see how their experiences had changed and how they contributed to the class. And the Marine Corps we do things a certain way, we act a certain way, and it's the way we do it. So when you see what other people have learned and what they experienced in the military and what they were doing over here when I was over there, it added a lot to the class discussion. And as you know, I mean, Darden is all discussion-based, case-based model. So people tie their experiences and their professional life to that date, to what they're saying in class. And so I got to see, even even at Darden, in a small percentage of the population, I got to see a much broader slice of what people, 5, 7, 8 years in the military had experienced from all 5 branches, and
Yeah.
men and women, and it was really cool. It was really good. And everybody contributed in different ways, and I learned there was plenty of things that I hadn't seen, and plenty of things that I had and they hadn't, and it was they did it really well. They did it really well.
Yeah, I think you're kind of surrounded with the greatest concentration of great people, smart people. I don't know. I think I had a great class at VMI too. You know what I mean? But so let's talk a little bit about. I want to jump into VetEvolve, which is a
Sure.
business that you started up and ran and recently exited. And I want to start with the exit, okay?
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of people that listen, and I'm curious. What are the 2 or 3 things that you want to share with people about, selling a business, right? What's the important stuff here? And then we're going to dig back into the entrepreneur's journey because you kind of went from soup to nuts on the whole thing here. So,
Hmm.
but let's start with the exit.
Um, the one thing about the exit that just to highlight a couple things, I think it doesn't feel exactly like you think it does. Kind of like everything else, it hits everybody in different ways. I founded the business with a partner, Nick. He and I co-led it, also a Marine. He and I co-led the business for 8 years, and we always had the same goal, which was to build the culture, build the business. And we knew and we believed that if we did that right, the exit would come. But it comes at a different time. It sort of feels a little different when it happens. And when I exited anyway, there's a tremendous amount of work that leads up to that sort of a transaction or that sort of process. So you're sort of sprinting till the end to get it finished, and then you exit. All this stuff happens. Nick continued to stay and lead the business really well. So it's not unlike getting out of the Marine Corps or leaving Darden. It's a huge transition, mentally and professionally, and there's an emotional component to it. So that all is, it's not exactly what you expect. I mean, I kind of felt like it would be, graduation, throw your hat, everything's happy, everything's great, and there was a lot of that. But there's also just a lot of change that happens in your day to day. Your financial position changes. The people that you worked with in certain roles, those evolve and change. So you see people that you worked with kind of gravitate into a new role, and you see your business change. And it's just it's a very deep experience. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's sort of
Kind of
a
like sending your kid off after they graduate from college.
yeah, well, yeah.
You're not quite there yet,
My
but
kids
it's what it seems like to me.
I still can't imagine a week without them in the house. So, but yes, it seems a lot like that.
Tell everybody what VetEvolve was. I mean, you basically did a roll up in the veterinary space.
Yeah, we did a roll up in the veterinary space. We there were several other competitors when we started the business in 2013. A key difference between our business and some of the other competitors was that Nick and I were in the business. We ran the business. We operated each clinic as if it were a standalone entity, and also had a management company behind it. There were several other groups that were doing more of a financial roll up. We chose to lead the business, in the business by putting our feet in it and actually operating it. So we were leading the businesses we bought in addition to consolidating them and operating them as a company. So when we had 4 clinics, let's say, we really had 5 businesses because each of the 4 clinics were operating relatively independently on what the customer saw. But in the back end, we had a 5th company, which was a management company that handled a lot of the roll up
Right.
opportunities, payroll, purchasing, hiring, those sort of things. So it was a slightly different variation on the theme that played to our strengths and to what we saw on the market, and ended up being just a great business and a great
How
experience.
many acquisitions did you make over the 8 years?
When I was there, I was involved in almost 30,
Uh-huh.
just shy of 30. Nick and I started out doing our first one, just the two of us, using SBA loan and some capital from some friends and family. And by the end, we had institutional investors involved in the business. They were helping with the acquisition. So we went from, me and Nick doing them at night after working in the business all day. We'd work on an acquisition at night to doing, 8 to 10 a year. with real support and, some incredible talent. So the business really went from what I like to call just a garage band to
Yeah.
quite a good professionally managed business with a lot of support. And, the business shifted throughout that time from where, Nick and I were running it. We were the heart and soul of the business and from the leadership perspective. And it was just two of us. As we expanded, by the time I transitioned out of the business, there were, 10, 12 people on the leadership team. No one was really important enough to move the business on his or her own. And everyone was contributing their own personality to the culture. And the business sort of became, I like to say it became self-aware. Like it kind of became, at first it was the, Nick and Paul show. Then it became the VetEvolve show, and we were really guiding it. So it was cool to see that transition. And luckily, I think Nick and I were both able to see that while we were in it. We could see the amazing changes that a great operator like Jessica DeCesar brings in, or a great CFO brings, or a new investor comes in with a new perspective. It changes your business and adds depth to it, and also diminishes your ability to control various things that you want in the business. So all that is very good for stability. And Nick and I had always focused very carefully and very diligently on creating a business that would survive long beyond us, and
Right.
in one sense served the pet owners, but in another sense served all the employees and the doctors that were working in the business. And we did that. So it got to the point where should I have chosen to do something crazy, like no person could really impact the business on their own. And it was a team effort, high level collaboration and a lot of work. And it's amazing to see the problems you can solve, the ideas people have, the new directions people push things, when you can open up the leadership to a more diverse group of people from different experiences. And we had people from all over the country. We had people come to our business from outside of the veterinary health industry. We had people come with relatively little experience. We had people come with 10 years of experience, and different age groups. And to see that all gel behind one sort of vision was really, really powerful. And I think it created something that's going to continue to go, for as long as people continue to see the value in it. And Nick has continued to lead the business. It's continued to generate investor interest. It's continued to grow in the market, both in reputation and size. So that's extremely rewarding to see. And now it admittedly has nothing to do with me at this point, but that's great to see. I mean, it was not we get to the sale and it goes off a cliff. Nick and I decide to go do something else. The business stops. It's its own thing now, and it was really, really quite an experience.
Being an entrepreneur as a business is growing, and um, it's sort of a rare individual that can kind of be the startup founder and the the large company private equity backed CEO. Two questions along that line. One, maybe this is the harder one. I mean, did you find that there were times in the business where you outgrew some of the management team that had gotten you to that point and you had to make some replacements? I mean, it's one thing to add talent. It's another thing to say, I've outgrown some of this. Talk a little bit about that decision-making process, because I'm pretty sure you encountered some of that.
We did. Luckily, most of our challenges, for me and Nick, were when to add the right people, not we need to switch people out,
Right.
or make a transition. But I do think that no, the animal health business is a nice business to operate, because at its essence, they're small business locations that are tied to their community, and the people in the individual clinics really care about what they do. They care about their clients. You don't really have to generate that for them. They naturally care a lot. At the operating level, the needs of the business change dramatically, as the business scales. So, we saw that a lot in finance and accounting, where we had, an infrastructure where we were outsourcing our accounting. We were using, outsourced controllers, for example, as we kind of needed them. But then you outgrow that and you realize that you need to have a CFO that is looking at this very carefully, that can command his side or her side of the business without a ton of oversight. The HR demands really changed in the business. I mean, the animal health business is a people business. So
Right.
as the business scaled, we had to continually invest and be very cognizant of who was interacting with our teams, who was the continuity to the people in the clinics, and how Nick and I, managed that. And it was, transitioning people in and out of the business as the business scales is a hard thing because you get emotionally connected to people and you see their value as they grow, and then the needs of the business really change as it scales, and particularly in an acquisition based business, the balance sheet grows sometimes even faster than the head count. And if you think, I mean, the first deal Nick and I did was $1.5 million deal. It was basically like a mortgage on a house. We could kind of get our heads around it pretty quickly. By the time I was exiting the business, there was extremely complicated credit agreements. Our CFO spent at least 40 hours on just his side of the house, and that was what was required to just keep something like that operating. So the transition of those needs really changes, and the hardest part for me and for Nick was making sure that the people who came into the business had that blend of talent that we needed to get us to the next level, but they also understood our culture, the certain way we did things. There were certain non-economic drivers in the business that were extremely important to the culture, and it never happened, but a failure to understand those could have been really problematic. So it wasn't
You've given me
necessarily.
the perfect segue to where I wanted to go next, which was all about culture. Because
Mhm.
we had an interesting conversation when we spoke previously about, the influence of both of you being, military veterans. And so were there some key tenets that were just core principles for the company that you and Nick established? And I want to follow up with that and say, I think there's some consistency between that and some of the procedures and practices
Mhm.
that you put in place of having been a Marine. But let's talk about the basic tenets of your culture. What was that?
Well, the basic tenets of our culture are, I mean, it's going to sound really simple, but it's a people first culture. It's an officers eat last culture, and it's a focus on the doers and understanding everyone's individual responsibility and how that contributes to the unified vision. And Nick and I were junior officers, captains in the Marines. I mean, it's all about your people. I mean, the best captain in the world is supported by 20 sergeants, and they do the work, and they drive your plan, they push you, they drive you crazy sometimes, but their contributions to the unit are what your leadership gets judged on, and you can't do anything without them. I mean, the captains can't go do things on their own, they do it in a group. So we really understood that, and that was something that he and I both learned at a very at a formative age in our development. And we were very comfortable with the fact that there's certain things where I may have oversight of this, but the technical expertise resides with this veterinarian, this CFO. Not unlike the Marines, we want to go jump in over here. Well, I need the master sergeant to help me implement that plan, regardless of whether we both think it's the right idea. I mean, he's the technical person that's leading that part of the op. So we developed I don't want to say siloed, but we were very respectful of what other people did in the business, and our ability to influence them and drive them. And then I think that we had both spent time in other professional worlds where bosses come first. I mean, they do things first. They leave first.
I'm
They
kind of glad a lot of our enemies operate that way, but
yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible. I mean, to me, it's like it was shocking at first to see. Coming from the Marines for 5 years is your first taste of like professional life. To get out of that and see that other things don't operate that way was like really kind of shocking. And what we found was when we implemented that leadership style, some of which was just the way we carried ourselves. It kind of comes through in the way we operate. But further, we took the leading Marines manual and we went through and changed all the words, and we made it all a little softer. Took out all the blow things up language and changed it to principles that were palatable for everybody. And what Nick and I believed when we started, and what we found to be true, was that people respond to that. I mean, they respond to a leader that wants to take care of them, that can communicate a vision, that's going to be demanding and add structure, but fair and kind. And there's no yelling in our business. It's not Full Metal Jacket, but there's certain things that we don't, we didn't negotiate on. I mean, if you were the leader of a business and you were the manager, your people came first, and you took care of them first, and we would solve our problems offline or separately. And the implementation of structure in a business, at least in the animal health world, provides a lot of stability for the employees if it's done in the correct way, and if it's done in a way that they can understand. And the simple example I use all the time when I discuss this is, scheduling. There's a tendency in scheduling a business with healthcare providers to say, okay, well, you can pick your schedule. Let's do what works for you, and we'll work with you because you're the technical expert. Well, that leads to an inconsistent schedule. People who think they're working 40 hours aren't getting it. It creates some instability in the business. So when you come in and put some structure around, hey, this is when we're going to be open. This is what the shifts will look like. We're going to have to make some changes on who works when, but we've committed to these employees. We're not changing that. It creates a stability where people say, okay, I know that this week I got 40 hours. Next week I'm getting 40 hours. I have Fridays off to pick up my kid. I know that's going to be taken care of at this time. So then the other 4 days of the week, I can really focus on what I'm doing. And there was always a fear, I think, when we came into a business that Nick and I were going to come in and, it was going to be this real painful process. But once the structure got implemented, it had a very calming effect, to people. And
kind of like every vehicle in the company has got the same things in the same place, and there's a reason for that. That's,
there's a reason for that, and it not unlike kids. They people function well with good boundaries. And when as long as you're willing to be flexible and understand how they work with other people's boundaries and other sides of the business, it created a lot of stability. And in the animal health world, which is kind of a crazy business, you have sick pets, people coming in at all different times of the day. So a reliable structure and a consistency to the way the mechanics run is provides a calming effect in what is a pretty crazy, like, day to day in the clinics.
This next question may get total cricket from you, but I'm going to try it anyway. Because when I was a young, second lieutenant, there was the equivalent would be like your gunny sergeant that in your first unit, who kind of took you under his wing and said, okay, Lieutenant, this is the way it's going to be. Was there somebody that, was in the veterinary space in the early days that kind of, showed you the ropes and took you under the wings as the new owner of the business? Or did you guys have to figure it out by trial and error? I'm curious.
It was really, I'd say it was like three parts. We had a lot of trial and error, a lot of Nick and I doing it. We had a lot of belief in ourselves, and we believed firmly in what we were doing. And so we were willing to go through that process, and we're willing to learn together. That was one. The first acquisition we did, this would be number two. The business was owned by Dr. Jerry Goldfarb. He had been through medical school in the Vietnam era. He was an Army veterinarian, but had gotten stuck in the Marine Corps barracks down in Quantico with a bunch of Marines. So he had some exposure to this. He was in his early 70s when we bought his business, and was just like the best first partner. Would pull us aside and say, "Hey, you're not seeing this the way I've seen this. You're taking a different approach." So it was just really a great, just a great first partner.
Right, a veteran, so to speak.
Just really helped us out.
Right.
And we also had, we were very selective with the people who invested with us initially in the business. They had, although no direct experience in animal health, they had experience building businesses, multi-site healthcare, and they were, our advisory board, for lack of a better term, and they were fantastic. So we could come to them with questions, problems. They were a little bit further down the road in their professional life, so they had seen more things than we had, could anticipate things a little better, and had a much broader lens, than just animal health. So we benefited from all that. And I think we had a good idea. We knew we could perform well, in the box, but we were also very clear that there was plenty we had to learn. So I think
you were humble. I think the military experience.
I guess it depends who you ask. We were humble enough, and we knew
humble enough. Okay.
We knew that there were plenty of blind spots that we had, that, where we needed help, and it worked well that way. I mean, I often think if we had bought, a tough clinic with with a different doctor who wasn't Jerry, the first time that could have been different. If our investor group had been, 100% financially focused and not willing to help or otherwise busy, that would have been different. Or if we had just been so myopically focused on the way we wanted to do it, I think that would have been different too. So it was a nice blend of all three of those. And, I think when you're starting out with anything, I mean, we learned this in, like you said, second lieutenant days. I mean, I had enough first days at different places to know that you don't know everything, and
Yeah.
you need to find that kind of champion who can help you out and the person you can call offline to help you. And so we were always sort of seeking that, and sponges for that information, but also willing to say, okay, I take your feedback. I hear what you're saying. That either aligns or doesn't with our core beliefs, and we're going to adapt it or take it or thank you, we'll shelve that. So it was, got a lot of good advice and a lot of good steerage. And there are hundreds of examples where someone would pull us aside and say, hey, Nick, look at this. Hey, Paul, look at this. And we'd be like, okay, I didn't see it that way. Let me think about that and kind of adjust course a little bit.
So, this is a question I ask pretty often when I've got a veteran and an entrepreneur on it. It's kind of scary being an entrepreneur. I mean, you've been shot at, but
That's kind of
what was the thing that scared you the most about entrepreneurship?
Delivering on commitments to other people. I think when Nick and I set off, we were able to look at our personal finances and what's going on in our houses, and you can kind of get comfortable with that. We are both married, so we had those conversations, and it wasn't a blind risk. I mean, we had talked about that. So, he and I were going to be okay. We were going to live through it. We could have lost some money or been embarrassed, but having someone like Jerry sell you the business that he'd run for 30 years, where he was going to continue to work, where he had 30 employees, that's heavy. To make sure.
It's interesting that he was the age that you talked about. I mean, being in his 70s. I'm just curious, generationally, but it sounds like he was a great mentor to you guys at the beginning. Were a lot of the folks that you acquired though younger, or were most of them at that sort of retirement age or beyond?
It shifted as the business got older, and grew, and that was mostly because of just the market, and things happened. Our initial batch of sellers tended to be, kind of within sight of retirement age. They were thinking of a succession plan, and their staff of veterinarians was generally much younger, about our age. So there was this kind of gap, and they were trying to transition their legacy in a productive way, both for them and their employees. As
the COVID impact and everybody buying pets had an effect on the business too, I guess.
Oh, COVID was, I mean, it was really challenging for us in a different sense, because we were told to stay open, and we were forced to keep operating. So rather than, in one sense, we didn't have to deal with this shutdown issue where, you lose all your revenue. Our issue was more about how do you get people to go into these clinics when they're afraid? How do you set up an A and B shift? How do you serve clients? We have the Department of Health saying we'll stay open. How do you manage that? And that played right to our strengths, because we had, okay, that, this is stress, this is friction, this is scary. We have a mission, we have a plan.
Yeah, that's the key word right there. It was kind of mission. And share one other story, because you talked about taking the, I don't know, we call it FM Field Manual 101, or I forget what the number was, but it's been that long. But you and I talked sort of jokingly about how I use the 5-paragraph op order, to kind of convey messaging and so forth. Were there just some stuff that was straight out of the book that you guys sort of used, that you put into the culture of the business?
There was a ton of it, and we had Fleet Marine Force Manual 1, Leading Marines, and we went through it, and we kept trying to search for ways to sit down at a laptop and like type this out in new ways and communicate some sort of a.
So you just plagiarize the whole thing, just spell, find and replace.
Once you leave the Naval Academy, there's no plagiarism. So we went through and we edited it, and it covered a lot of things that are, for us were very basic, but for people we interacted with, like they'd never been exposed to that, and things like, a mission type order, what are we trying to get at? If we have to stop this meeting in 10 minutes, what are you going to go try to do if you don't have all the information?
Did you ever want to take them up to Quantico and run them through the Quigley?
We did always want to do that. We were both concerned that we wouldn't finish it at our more advanced age and get smoked by some young employee of ours. But also, yeah, we found that happy medium between communicating our values and a lot of the Marine Corps values, which the Marine Corps communicates in a very intense way, to communicating those in a more palatable way. And one of my favorite stories is that I always think back about is one of our first sellers came and she said, "I'm just so grateful you guys don't come in here and do a bunch of Marine Corps stuff and you kind of keep your Marine Corps stuff off to the side." And I'm just like, "Yeah, you're operating out of the Marine Corps manual. You just don't know it.
You just didn't even know it.
You don't realize that we've in our language we've changed puppy to small dog and all the words, and you're doing the same things we talk about. So people would come into meetings and they say, "Hey, this is why we're here. This is what we're going to do. I want to accomplish this," and I talk about it. And everybody could kind of fall back on that one sentence where it's like, "Oh, I'm confused. Wait, well, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to focus." Accountability of your task, owning it all the way through. The really basic leadership principles around.
Were you able to push the initiative down to the level? You know how we try to get our, United States military, with, in the absence of orders, attack, kind of a thing. Did you implement some of that with the folks at the
we
operations
did.
level?
We really did. And we, back to your, ties to your question from earlier about people. I mean, we just had, we had the right people at the right time to do this, but we were constantly pushing people to do more with their talent, not like get more water out of the rock, but
Right.
more like say, "Hey, we're implementing this new purchasing plan. You've done this before. Let us know if you have a problem. We'd like to see if it's done by 6 months. Here are the resources you have. Go at it." And that actually started. It made people nervous at first, I think, because you can kind of feel like a little too independent. But what we found is that people that started coming to us because they liked that. They were working in much bigger companies at a more senior role, but they had less responsibility, less agency over what was happening, less control of the follow through. So they liked it, and we liked it because Nick and I would have a vision on how to implement something. We'd turn it over to one of our operators, and they'd implement it in a much better way. With something we'd never thought of, where they applied their own experience, and it was just something we'd never thought of. So people put their own spin on the business. They felt their own impact through what they were doing. They felt a little pressure because it was on them, and it was up to them to come to us for support or for resources. But it worked really well. And we had like all these things. There's Nick and I did a lot of things well. I think we're talented guys, but we had a lot of right people at the right time that did a lot of the work and pushed the business in different ways and added a bunch of capabilities and angles and talent that he and I didn't have. And that was just really, really, really good. And he and I had both led units in kind of the conventional Marine Corps. We led reconnaissance units, so we had seen this before. I mean, when you see someone who can drive the train, like it when you see it. So we knew that, and we could put the right people in the right spots. And the people we had around us in the culture, like they wanted that. I mean, they wanted like, "Oh, I want those guys to call on me and let me try to do this because I can do it my way, and I can deal with my people the way I want to, and I can report back to them. And as long as it's done a certain way, then they're going to be, they're going to be cool with it." And it was really good. And like any other, people-based business or a Marine Corps platoon, I mean, the performance is a reflection of the people you have around you and how you communicate with them. Not so much you. And we were good at picking. We knew it when we see it, and we also got super lucky with a lot of good people.
Hey, let's wrap. We got to wrap up, but real quickly, you've set up a thing called range control. But what's the next chapter look like for you right now?
Well, I'm looking to transfer transfer some of the skills I've learned into Elevate. When we started VetEvolve, we were behind the front desk, learning the point of sale system, and we transitioned all the way up to leading a pretty big business that Nick now continues to lead. Now I'm looking at it from, sort of not skipping, but transitioning all that stuff I learned from the intermediate steps to new entrepreneurs who are looking to start out. I can help them see where they need to go and provide them some of the advice and guidance and investment support that people provided us, when we were going to start.
If someone wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, smoke signals, how do we do that?
We got a little range control website, first name, last name at Gmail. I love talking about this stuff. Was talking with a couple entrepreneurs today who are just starting a business, and they feel like they can't really see the vision, but I can totally see, where they need to go and what step they need to take. So happy to talk about anything with anybody, and it's been a really exciting chapter to kind of shift gears and look at it from a different.
We'll put, if we may, we'll put links to your website and information so that folks can get in touch with you on the show notes here.
That'd be
Paul,
great.
it's been great. Fascinating story. We could talk a lot longer.
Well, thank you for your time. It's fun to talk about. It's been fun to have a few months of space to think about it with a little bit of a detached view, and it was our obsession there for a number of years. So it's nice to look back and think about it from a kind of a different point of view. Appreciate the questions.
Thank you. Hey, you've been listening to the Mission Oriented Podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest has been Paul Habenicht. And Paul, thank you. I'm going to throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to you. I being an Army guy, I'm not going to say, beat Army, but if you want to, you can. But anyway, it's been great to have you as a guest on the show. You've been listening to the Mission Oriented Podcast. It's been a great day. Everybody have a great time, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the Veteran Crowd Network, visit us at www.veterancrowdnetwork.com.